Hey guys, it's Mrs. Yeagle, and welcome to the reading for Chapter 4 from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. This chapter is called At Flourish and Blots. I'm going to actually split this chapter into smaller chunks so that hopefully all the videos will upload. So this video is going to go from page 42 until the very top of 47. So here we go. Chapter 4, At Flourish and Blots. Life at the Burrow was as different as possible from life on Privet Drive. The Dursleys liked everything neat and ordered. The Weasleys' house burst with the strange and unexpected. Harry got a shock the first time he looked in the mirror over the kitchen mantelpiece, and it shouted, "Tuck your shirt in, Scruffy!" The ghoul in the attic howled and dropped pipes whenever he felt things were getting too quiet, and small explosions from Fred and George's bedroom were considered perfectly normal. What Harry found most unusual about life at Ron's, however, wasn't the talking mirror or the clanking ghoul. It was the fact that everybody there seemed to like him. Mrs. Weasley fussed over the state of his socks and tried to force him to eat 4th helpings at every meal. Mr. Weasley liked Harry to sit next to him at the dinner table so he could bombard him with questions about life with Muggles, asking him to explain how things like plugs in the postal service worked. "Fascinating," he would say as Harry talked him through using a telephone. "Ingenious, really, how many ways Muggles have found of getting along without magic." Harry heard from Hogwarts one sunny morning about a week after he'd arrived at the Burrow. He and Ron went down to breakfast to find Mr. and Mrs. Weasley and Ginny already sitting at the kitchen table. The moment she saw Harry, Ginny accidentally knocked her porridge bowl to the floor with a loud clatter. Ginny seemed very prone to knocking things over whenever Harry entered a room. She dived under the table to retrieve the bowl and emerged with her face glowing like the setting sun. Pretending he hadn't noticed this, Harry sat down and took the toast Mrs. Weasley offered him. "Letters from school," said Mr. Weasley, passing Harry and Ron identical envelopes of yellowish parchment addressed in green ink. "Dumbledore already knows you're here, Harry. Doesn't miss a trick, that man. You two have got him too," he added, as Fred and George ambled in, still in their pajamas. For a few minutes there was silence as they all read their letters. Harry's told him to catch the Hogwarts Express, as usual, from King's Cross Station on September 1st. There was also a list of the new books he'd need for the coming year. Second-year students will require The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, by Miranda Gottschalk, Break with a Banshee, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Gadding with Ghouls, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Holidays with Hags, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Travels with Trolls, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Voyages with Vampires, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Wanderings with Werewolves, by Gilderoy Lockhart, Year with a Yeti, by Gilderoy Lockhart. Fred, who'd finished his own list, peered over at Harry's. "You've been told to get all Lockhart's books, too," he said. "The new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher must be a fan. Bet it's a witch." At this point, Fred caught his mother's eye and quickly busied himself with the marmalade. "That lot won't come cheap," said George, with a quick look at his parents. "Lockhart's books are really expensive." "Well, we'll manage," said Mrs. Weasley, but she looked worried. "I expect we'll be able to pick up a lot of Jenny's things second-hand." "Oh, are you starting at Hogwarts this year?" Harry asked Ginny. She nodded, blushing to the tips of her flaming hair, and put her elbow in the butter dish. Fortunately, no one saw this except Harry, because just then Ron's elder brother Percy walked in. He was already dressed, his Hogwarts prefect badge pinned to his sweater vest. "Morning, all," said Percy briskly. "Lovely day." He sat down in the only remaining chair, but leapt up again almost immediately, pulling from underneath him a molting gray feather duster. At least, that was what Harry thought it was, until he saw it was breathing. "Errol!" said Ron, taking the limp owl from Percy and extracting a letter from under its wing. "Finally! He's got Hermione's answer. I wrote to her saying we were going to try and rescue you from the Dursleys." He carried Errol to a perch just inside the back door and tried to stand him on it, but Errol flopped straight off again, so Ron lay him on the draining board instead, muttering, "Pathetic." Then he ripped open Hermione's letter and read it out loud. "Dear Ron and Harry, if you're there. I hope everything went all right and that Harry is okay and that you didn't do anything illegal to get him out, Ron, because that would get Harry in trouble too. I've been really worried, and if Harry is all right, will you please let me know at once? but perhaps it would be better if you used a different owl, because I think another delivery might finish your one off. I'm very busy with schoolwork, of course." "How can she be?" said Ron in horror. "We're on vacation." "And we're going to London next Wednesday to buy my new books. Why don't we meet in Diagon Alley? Let me know what's happening as soon as you can. Love, from Hermione." "Well, that fits nicely. We can all go and get all your things then, too," said Mrs. Weasley, starting to clear the table. "What are you all up to today?" Harry, Ron, Fred, and George were planning to go up the hill to a small paddock the Weasleys owned. It was surrounded by trees that blocked it from the view of the village below, meaning that they could practice Quidditch there, as long as they didn't fly too high. They couldn't use real Quidditch balls, which would have been hard to explain if they'd escaped and flown away over the village. Instead, they threw apples for one another to catch. They took turns riding Harry's Nimbus 2000, which was easily the best broom. Ron's old shooting star was often outstripped by passing butterflies. 5 minutes later, they were marching up the hill, broomsticks over their shoulders. They'd asked Percy if he wanted to join them, but he said he was too busy. Harry had only seen Percy at mealtimes so far. He stayed shut in his room the rest of the time. "Wish I knew what he was up to," said Fred, frowning. "He's not himself. His exam results came the day before you did. 12 owls, and he hardly gloated at all." "Ordinary wizarding levels," George explained, seeing Harry's puzzled look. "Bill got 12, too. If we're not careful, we'll have another head boy in the family. I don't think I could stand the shame." Bill was the oldest Weasley brother. He and his next brother, Charlie, had already left Hogwarts. Harry had never met either of them, but he knew that Charlie was in Romania studying dragons, and Bill was in Egypt working for the Wizards' Bank, Gringotts. "Dunno how Mum and Dad are going to afford all our school stuff this year," said George after a while. 5 sets of Lockhart books, and Ginny needs robes and a wand and everything." Harry said nothing. He felt a bit awkward. Stored in an underground vault at Gringotts in London was a small fortune that his parents had left him. Of course, it was only in the wizarding world that he had money. You couldn't use galleons, sickles, and nuts in Muggle shops. He'd never mentioned his Gringotts bank account to the Dursleys. He didn't think their horror of anything connected with magic would stretch to a large pile of gold.